12 hours of trauma triage usually numbs you to shock. But standing in the hospital parking lot, staring at my phone, I felt my pulse spike. I was expecting a flight confirmation for my daughter Madison's wedding, an event I'd already wired $45,000 to secure. Instead, I found an email. No subject line. Just a paragraph explaining that I didn't fit the quote-unquote Vogue aesthetic of her big day. Then came the line that stopped my heart. If you want to be part of it, here are the coordinates. You can watch the roof on Google Earth. It's basically the same view. Oh. If you paid $45,000 for a wedding and got told to watch it on Google Earth, what is the first thing you would do? Tell me in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one seeing red right now. I sat at my kitchen island, still wearing my scrubs. There was a faint smear of iodine on my left sleeve, a souvenir from a car crash victim I'd helped stabilize 2 hours ago. In the ER, I am head nurse Catherine. When I speak, doctors listen. When I give an order, lives are saved. I am competent. I am vital. I am respected. But sitting in the silence of the house I paid for, looking at the email on my phone, I didn't feel like a vital professional. I felt like a servant who had just been fired for being too old. For the first time in years, I didn't immediately jump to fix it. I didn't call Madison to beg. I didn't text Tyler to ask if he knew about this. Instead, I let the phone screen go dark and sat with the quiet. I started doing what I do best. Triage. I looked at the hemorrhage of my life over the last decade and started calculating the blood loss. It wasn't just the $45,000 for the venue deposit. It was the $20,000 I gave Tyler for that tech startup that never launched. It was the tuition for Madison's fashion marketing degree she never used because being an influencer was, quote, more authentic. It was the double shifts I worked on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, on my own birthday, just so I could write the checks that kept their lifestyles afloat. I had been operating under a delusion. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was giving them the head start I never had. But looking at that email, at the callous "ol" at the end of a sentence that erased my existence, I realized I hadn't been raising children. I had been financing parasites. There is a concept in psychology called the trap of normalized cruelty. It's the boiled frog effect. If you drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in cold water and turn up the heat degree by degree, it cooks to death without ever realizing it's dying. That was me. I was the frog. It started small. A forgotten Mother's Day here. A snide comment about my outdated clothes there. Madison rolling her eyes when I talked about my shift. Tyler borrowing money and forgetting to say thank you. I swallowed it all. I told myself that's just how young people are. I told myself they were stressed. I rationalized the disrespect until I couldn't distinguish love from exploitation. I had taught them that my love was a currency they didn't have to earn. I had taught them that I was a renewable resource that would never run dry. I had trained them to treat me like an ATM, and you don't invite an ATM to a wedding. You just take the cash and leave the machine in the lobby. My chest didn't hurt. I wasn't crying. In fact, my pulse was steadier than it had been all day. It was the clarity of a diagnosis. The relationship was necrotic. And in the ER, when tissue is dead, you don't put a Band-Aid on it. You cut it out. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., an automatic wire transfer was scheduled to send another $75,000 to Paris to cover the catering and the venue balance. $75,000. My retirement. My safety net. My blood, sweat, and overtime. I stood up and poured the rest of my cold coffee down the sink. The mom bank wasn't just closed for the holiday. It was insolvent. I drove to the bank in silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and the cold calculus in my head. In emergency medicine, panic is a luxury you cannot afford. When a patient is crashing, you don't scream. You get quiet. You get precise. You focus on the one action that will stop the death spiral. For 30 years, my financial life had been a series of transfusions. I had bled my savings dry to keep my children's lifestyles oxygenated. I had taken extra shifts to pay for Tyler's credit card debt. I had refinanced my home to fund Madison's branding shoots. I was the universal donor, and they were the wounds that never closed. Walking into the bank felt different this time. Usually, I walked in with my shoulders hunched, carrying the anxiety of, how will I make this work? Today, I walked in with the posture of a surgeon entering the operating theater. Mr. Henderson saw me coming. He stood up from his desk, buttoning his jacket. He knew me well. He knew my accounts better than I did. He had watched me drain my 401k penalty-free just to keep Tyler out of legal trouble 3 years ago. He gave me that professional, pitying smile bankers give to women who set themselves on fire to keep their children warm. "Catherine," he said, gesturing to the chair. "I assume we're finalizing the transfer for the Paris vendors? I have the paperwork ready for the morning wire." I sat down. I didn't touch the candy bowl. I didn't ask about his grandkids. "No," I said. "I need to cancel the wire. The $75,000 stays in my account. And I need to put a stop payment on the venue deposit check if it hasn't cleared." Mr. Henderson froze. His hand hovered over his keyboard. He blinked, looking at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. "Catherine," he said slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That wire is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. It covers the catering, the lighting, the rentals. If we cancel this, the contracts are void. The wedding is in 6 days. This will implode the entire event." He was looking at me with alarm, waiting for me to realize my mistake. He thought I was confused. He thought I was having a senior moment. "I am aware of the timeline," I said. My voice was flat, clinical. "I am aware that without this capital, the event is insolvent. That is the point." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he started typing. The sound of the keys clacking was the only noise in the room. It sounded like a gavel coming down, over and over again. "I'll need you to sign a revocation form," he said, sliding a paper across the mahogany desk. "This confirms that you understand the beneficiary will not receive funds and any associated fees are your responsibility." I picked up the pen. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. $75,000. It wasn't just money. It was my freedom. It was my future. It was the trips to Italy I never took. It was the renovation on the kitchen I never started. It was the security of knowing I wouldn't die working a 12-hour shift at 70 years old. I signed my name. My hand didn't shake. The ink flowed smooth and dark. "It's done," Mr. Henderson said, stamping the paper. "The funds are locked." I stood up. I felt a phantom sensation, like a physical weight physically sliding off my shoulders. I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sun. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely for the first time in decades. I expected to feel guilt. I expected the familiar crushing nausea that usually accompanied disappointing my children. But standing there on the pavement, listening to the traffic, I felt something entirely different. I felt lighter. I felt like I had just cut the sandbags off a sinking balloon. The wedding was going to crash. The fallout would be nuclear. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one in the blast zone. I pulled into my driveway, the adrenaline from the bank slowly fading into a dull, rhythmic throb behind my eyes. I just wanted silence. I wanted to sit in my chair, take off my shoes, and process the fact that I had just incinerated my daughter's dream wedding to save my own life. But my driveway wasn't empty. Tyler's car was parked crookedly across the grass, blocking the garage. My son was pacing on the front porch, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand chopping the air aggressively. He's 29 years old. He has a degree in business I paid for and a resume full of 6-month gaps. He calls himself an entrepreneur. I call it unemployed with a better vocabulary. I turned off the ignition. In the past, seeing him distressed would have triggered my reflex to fix it. I would have rushed out, asked what was wrong, offered to write a check before he even finished the sentence. But today, looking at him through the windshield, I didn't see my baby boy. I saw a symptom. I got out of the car. Tyler hung up the phone and stormed down the steps. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say hello. He launched the attack before my feet hit the pavement. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. His face was flushed, veins popping in his neck. "Madison just called me. She says the coordinator can't confirm the funds. She's hyperventilating, Mom. She's in Paris, and you're playing games with the wire transfer." I walked past him toward the front door. "I'm not playing games, Tyler. I canceled it." He scrambled to get in front of me, blocking my path to the door. He looked genuinely shocked, as if the concept of me saying no was a violation of the laws of physics. You canceled it? Are you insane? He laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. God, you are so petty. This is because of the invite, isn't it? You're mad because you didn't make the cut for the A-list, so now you're going to burn the whole thing down. I stopped. I looked at him. I engaged the same clinical detachment I use when a patient screams at me because they've been waiting 3 hours for stitches. It's not about the invite, Tyler. It's about the fact that I'm done paying for parties I'm not welcome at. Oh, spare me the martyr act, he sneered. You've always been jealous of her. You can't stand that she's actually living the life you wanted. You're just a bitter old nurse, and you hate that she's special. You're trying to humiliate her because you're insecure. His words were designed to hurt. They were precision-guided missiles aimed at my deepest insecurities as a mother, but they didn't land. Instead, they illuminated the diagnosis. There is an invisible chain that binds a survivor to their dependent. Tyler wasn't attacking me because he loved his sister. He wasn't defending Madison's honor. He was attacking me because he was terrified. He was watching the host organism detach itself. If I could cut off Madison, the golden child, the princess, then nobody was safe. If the bank of Mom was closed for the wedding of the century, it was definitely closed for his next rent payment. It was closed for his next car repair. It was closed for the next time he needed a bailout because his genius startup idea failed. His aggression wasn't strength. It was the panic of a parasite realizing the host is waking up. He hated me in that moment, not because I was cruel, but because he needed me, and he knew he couldn't survive without me. And he despised himself for that weakness, so he projected it onto me. You're pathetic, he spat, stepping closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. You're going to fix this. You're going to go back to the bank, apologize, and wire that money. Or I swear to God, Mom, you're going to lose us both. We won't speak to you again. I looked at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes. He was waiting for me to cave. He was waiting for the apology. He was waiting for the checkbook. I know, I said softly. He blinked, confused. You know what? I know you won't speak to me, I said. Because if I'm not paying, you have nothing to say. I stepped around him. I didn't push him. I didn't yell. I just walked to my front door, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. Mom, he screamed, lunging for the door as I opened it. Don't you dare walk away from me. I stepped inside and closed the door in his face. I threw the deadbolt. The heavy, mechanical thud of the lock sliding home echoed in the entryway. He pounded on the door for 5 minutes. He screamed insults. He threatened. He bargained. I stood in the hallway, listening to the muffled noise of his tantrum. I didn't feel the urge to open it. I checked the lock one more time. The diagnosis was confirmed. The prognosis for our relationship was poor. But for the patient, for me, survival was looking likely. Tyler eventually gave up pounding on the door. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air pressure drop before a tornado touches down. My phone, however, was still screaming. It vibrated across the kitchen island, a relentless buzz of notifications. Madison. Tyler. My ex-husband, Richard. Even Richard's new wife, Elena. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured a glass of water, sat down, and unlocked the screen. I needed to know the blast radius. Madison had sent 18 texts in the last hour. Please pick up. The coordinator is leaving. Mom, you can't do this. Everyone is asking what happened. I bypassed the texts and opened Instagram. I needed to see the fantasy I was paying for. Madison had posted a story 20 minutes ago, probably just before the bank notification hit. It was a sneak peek of the reception setup in the chateau's Great Hall. It was beautiful. I'll give her that. Thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, gold-rimmed chargers. It looked like a spread in Vogue, just like she wanted. Then I saw the next slide. A close-up of the calligraphy seating chart. The head table. I zoomed in. The resolution was high enough to read the names scripted in gold ink. There was Madison. There was Alexander. There was Richard. And right next to Richard, in the seat traditionally reserved for the mother of the bride, was a name. It wasn't Catherine. It said Elena. Elena is Richard's new wife. She's 32, comes from old money, and has never worked a 12-hour shift in her life. She fits the aesthetic. She wears couture without trying. She looks like she belongs in a French chateau. I sat there, staring at the pixels. The final piece of the diagnostic puzzle clicked into place. The email about the Vogue aesthetic hadn't been about my dress size or my hair. It hadn't been about keeping the guest list intimate. It was about erasure. Madison hadn't just excluded me, she had recast the role. She wanted a mother who matched the venue. She wanted the status that Elena provided, the visual continuity of wealth. I was the bankroll, but Elena was the prop. I waited for the hurt to come. I waited for the crushing sense of rejection that usually accompanied being replaced, but it didn't arrive. Instead, I felt a clinical detachment, the kind you feel when you finally locate the source of the bleed. If I wasn't the mother of the bride, if that role had been filled by someone younger, richer, and more photogenic, then I certainly wasn't responsible for the bill. The last thread of guilt I had been holding on to snapped. It was a clean break. I closed Instagram and opened a new tab. I had $75,000 sitting in my account, money that had been earmarked for a party where I was essentially being photoshopped out of existence. I typed Rome architectural tours into the search bar. I had dreamed of seeing the Colosseum since I was 20 years old. I had a stack of books on Roman engineering on my nightstand that I'd been meaning to read for decades. I always told myself I'd go when the kids were settled, when tuition was paid, when the weddings were over, when there was enough money left over. There was enough money now. I found a luxury tour starting in 3 days. Private guides. 5-star accommodation near the Pantheon. An itinerary that focused on structure, endurance, and history. Things that lasted. I clicked book now. The confirmation email popped up seconds later. Your Roman holiday awaits. I put the phone down. The vibrating stopped for a moment, the screen going dark. I looked around my kitchen. It was quiet. It was mine. And for the first time in 30 years, so was my life. 1 week later, I stood in the center of the Colosseum. The stone beneath my feet was 2,000 years old. It had survived fires, earthquakes, and the collapse of empires. It was a monument to endurance. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, surrounded by things that were built to last, rather than things that were built to look good on Instagram. It was 2 p.m. in Rome, which meant it was 9 a.m. in Paris. The exact moment the florists and the caterers would be expecting their final balances to clear. My phone rang. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. I had been expecting this call for 6 days. I answered it, not because I was worried, but because I wanted to hear the sound of consequences arriving. Mom. Madison's voice was a shriek, distorted by bad reception and pure panic. Mom, pick up. Where are you? The coordinator is threatening to leave. The florists are packing up the truck. They say the wire never came. I held the phone a few inches from my ear. The background noise on her end was a cacophony of shouting French and slamming doors. The sound of a fantasy disintegrating. Mom, are you there? She screamed. Fix this. Wire the money right now. They're going to walk. I looked up at the arches of the amphitheater, framing the bright blue Italian sky. I took a slow breath, tasting the dust of history. I'm here, I said calmly. Then send it, she sobbed. Why didn't it go through? Tyler said you went to the bank. Did you mess up the numbers? Mom, please, Alexander's parents are staring at me. This is humiliating. I didn't mess up the numbers, Madison, I said. I canceled the transfer. The silence on the line was absolute. It lasted for 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. You. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. You canceled it? Why? Because I realized you were right, I said. You told me I didn't fit the aesthetic. You told me my presence would be a distraction. You wanted me to be invisible. So I made myself invisible. And since I'm not there, I'm certainly not paying for the party. You can't do this, she screamed, the panic returning, sharper this time. This is my wedding. You are ruining my life. You are selfish. You are jealous. You are. I let her scream. I listened to the insults, the same ones Tyler had used, the the same ones I had feared for years. But here, thousands of miles away, they didn't land. They sounded small. They sounded like a child throwing a tantrum because the vending machine ate her dollar. There is a philosophy I read about once called the justice of the sower. It says that true justice isn't about burning down your enemy's field. It's about taking your seeds and planting them in your own garden. It's about realizing that you can't force a harvest from barren ground. I had spent 30 years watering weeds, hoping they would turn into roses. I had poured my resources into people who could not grow. Canceling that wire wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of agriculture. I was finally planting my resources in soil that could sustain me. I was investing in my own joy. "Mom, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I'll let you come. I'll change the seating chart. I'll kick Elena out. Just send the money. I promise I'll fix it." It was the negotiation phase. The bargaining. She was trying to sell me a ticket to my own exploitation. "It's too late for that, Madison," I said. "I'm not in Boston." "What? Where are you?" I walked toward the edge of the viewing platform. Below me, the ruins stretched out, magnificent and broken and real. "You told me I could watch the wedding from a distance," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You sent me coordinates. You told me to use a screen." "Mom, where are you?" "I'm doing exactly what you asked," I said. "I'm watching from a distance. A very long distance. I'm in Rome." "Rome," she choked out. "Yes," I said. "And the view is spectacular." I didn't wait for her response. I pressed the red button. The call ended. The connection severed. I put the phone in my bag and turned my face up to the Italian sun. The wedding in Paris didn't just fail. It evaporated. Madison's Instagram, usually a relentless feed of curated perfection, went completely dark. There were no slow-motion videos of the chateau. No photos of the 7-course meal. No hashtags about the dream aesthetic. I learned the details later, filtered through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances. Without the final $75,000, the chateau locked its doors. The vendors walked. The wedding of the century was downsized to a chaotic dinner in the hotel lobby restaurant. The final blow came from the VIP guest. Elena, the woman who was supposed to replace me, reportedly left before the appetizers were served. Apparently, a budget crisis didn't fit her aesthetic. She flew home on the same private jet she arrived in, leaving Madison and Richard to split the bill for the hotel rooms on their personal credit cards. Madison's influencer reputation took a hit she couldn't filter away. It's hard to sell a lifestyle brand when your biggest launch event is exposed as a fraud. As for Tyler, he sent me a text 2 days later. It was a picture of his packed bags and a message asking if he could crash at the house for a few weeks until things blew over. I didn't reply. I called my neighbor in Boston and asked her to double-check that the new security system was armed. The Mom Bank wasn't just closed. The branch had been demolished. That evening, I sat at a small table outside a trattoria in Rome. I ordered carbonara and a glass of red wine that cost more than I used to spend on a week of groceries. I watched the sun set over the ruins of an empire that had fallen and been rebuilt, layer by layer, for centuries. For the first time in 30 years, I sat through a meal without checking my phone. I wasn't worrying about Tyler's rent. I wasn't calculating the interest on Madison's student loans. I wasn't wondering if I was doing enough, giving enough, being enough. I realized that I hadn't lost a family. I had lost a burden. I had lost the heavy, suffocating weight of being the only thing holding up a house of cards. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like grapes and earth and freedom. I had spent decades playing the supporting role in my own life. I was the producer, the financier, the fix-it crew. But sitting there in the golden light of the Roman evening, I realized the script had changed. I wasn't the extra anymore. I was the protagonist. I learned that you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, share the story. And if you're still holding the match, blow it out.